Hello, everybody, and welcome to part two of The Little Mermaid. If you recall, in part one of The Little Mermaid, we started the story and we stopped where the Little Mermaid decided she was going to visit a witch because she wanted to become a human. Now, this story, the genre of this story is a fairy tale. And usually, well, a fairy tale is actually a fiction story, right? It's about make believe events and characters. Now, we all know that fiction means the story has events and characters that can only happen in our imagination. And fiction stories cannot happen in real life. So, when an author writes a fiction story or a fairy tale, I should say, he is actually using his or her imagination. In a fairy tale, of course, we have characters, and usually they can be people or they can be animals as well. Fairy tale stories include make believe, good and bad characters. In the story, the good character is usually facing what the bad character has done. Characters are sometimes animals that can talk, people with magical powers, or a character that has a spell over them and needs help. Okay, so let's see, what else should we know? There's always magic in a story. For example, Cinderella has the fairy godmother, right? The Prince and the Frog, for example, they are good characters, but the frog has a spell on him, right? Belle, Beauty and the Beast. Belle was very kind to everyone. She even was very kind to the Beast, who turned out to be a character that had a spell, a magic spell on him, and it turned into a beast. So he needed to turn back into his real self. Okay, so in a fairy tale, a character also changes. It takes a good character, it takes some good sacrifices in order to change a character of a bad person. For example, in Beauty and the Beast was bad in the beginning, but Belle was treating him so kindly, his character, the way he's behaving, started to change. Okay, so a character is the person or the animal who is in the story, but also is the behavior of a person or a person who has a spell on him. Okay, and let's continue with our story today. We're going to continue where we stopped. In our story, we stopped when the little mermaid decided she was going to visit the witch because she wanted to become a human. And that is a very big sacrifice. Let's pick up from then. She came to a large opening in the wood where the ground was all slimy and where some huge fat water snakes were gamboling about. In the middle of this opening was a house built of the bones of the wrecked. There sat the witch, letting a toad eat out of her mouth, just as mortals let a little canary eat sugar. She called the hideous water snakes her little chickens and allowed them to crawl about on her unsightly bosom. I know very well what you have come here for, said the witch. It is very foolish of you. All the same, you shall have your way, because it will lead you into misfortune, my fine princess. You want to get rid of your fish's tail, and instead to have two stumps to walk about upon like human beings, so that the young prince may fall in love with you, and that you may win him and an immortal soul. Saying this, she gave such a loud, hideous laugh that the toad and snakes fell to the ground and wriggled about there. You are just in the nick of time, said the witch. After sunrise tomorrow, I should not be able to help you until another year had run its course. I will make you a potion, and before sunrise, you must swim ashore with it. Seat yourself on the beach and drink it. Then your tail will divide and shrivel up to what men call beautiful legs. But it hurts. It is as if a sharp sword were running through you. All who see you will say that you are the most beautiful child of man they have ever seen. You will keep your gliding gait. No dancer will rival you, but every step you take will be as if you were treading upon sharp knives, so sharp as to draw blood. If you are willing to suffer all this, I'm ready to help you. Yes, said the little princess with a trembling voice, thinking of the prince and of winning an undying soul. But remember, said the witch, when once you have received a human form, you can never be a mermaid again. You will never again be able to dive down through the water to your sisters and to your father's palace. And if you do not succeed in winning the prince's love, so that for your sake he will forget father and mother, cleave to you with his whole heart, let the priest join your hands and make you man and wife, you will gain no immortal soul. The first morning after his marriage with another, your heart will break, and you will turn into foam of the sea. I will do it, said the little mermaid, as pale as death. But you will have to pay me too, said the witch. And it is no trifle that I demand. You have the most beautiful voice of any at the bottom of the sea, and I dare say that you think you will fascinate him with it. But you must give me that voice. I will have the best you possess in return for my precious potion. I have to mingle my own blood with it, so as to make it as sharp as a two-edged sword. But if you take my voice, said the little mermaid, what have I left? Your beautiful form, said the witch, your gliding gait, and your speaking eyes. With these, you ought surely to be able to bewitch a human heart. Well, have you lost courage? Pour out your little tongue, and I will cut it off in payment for the powerful draught. Let it be done, said the little mermaid, and the witch put on her cauldron to brew the magic potion. There is nothing like cleanliness, said she, as she scoured the pot with a bundle of snakes. Then she punctured her breast and let the black blood drop into the cauldron, and the steam took the most weird shape, enough to frighten anyone. Every moment the witch threw new ingredients into the pot, and when it boiled, the bubbling was like the sound of crocodiles weeping. At last the potion was ready, and it looked like the clearest water. There it is, said the witch, and thereupon she cut off the tongue of the little mermaid, who was dumb now and could neither sing nor speak. If the polyps should seize you when you go back through my wood, said the witch, just drop a single drop of this liquid on them, and their arms and fingers will burst into 1,000 pieces. But the little mermaid had no need to do this, for at the mere sight of the bright liquid, which sparkled in her hand like a shining star, they drew back in terror. Soon she got past the wood, the bog, and the eddying whirlpools. She saw her father's palace. The lights were all out in the great ballroom, and no doubt all the household was asleep. But she did not dare to go in now that she was dumb and about to leave her home forever. She felt as if her heart would break with grief. She stole into the garden and plucked the flower from each of her sister's plots, wafted with her hand countless kisses toward the palace, and then rose up through the dark blue water. The sun had not risen when she came in sight of the prince's palace and landed at the beautiful marble steps. The moon was shining bright and clear. The little mermaid drank the burning, stinging draught, and it was like a sharp two-edged sword running through her tender frame. She fainted away and lay as if she were dead. When the sun rose on the sea, she woke up and became conscious of a sharp pang. But just in front of her stood the handsome young prince, fixing his coal black eyes on her. She saw that her fish's tail was gone and that she had the prettiest little white legs any maiden could desire. But she was quite naked, so she wrapped her long, thick hair around her. The prince asked who she was and how she came there. She looked at him tenderly and with a sad expression in her dark blue eyes, but could not speak. Then he took her by the hand and led her into the palace. Every step she took was as the witch had warned her beforehand, as if she were treading on sharp knives and spikes, but she bore it gladly. Led by the prince, she moved as lightly as a bubble, and he and everyone else marveled at her graceful gliding gait. Clothed in the costliest silks and muslins, she was the greatest beauty in the palace. But she was dumb and could neither sing nor speak. Beautiful slaves clad in silks and gold came forward and sang to the prince and his royal parents. One of them sang better than all the others, and the prince clapped his hands and smiled at her. That made the little mermaid very sad, for she knew that she used to sing far better herself. She thought, oh, if he only knew that for the sake of being with him, I had given up my voice forever. Now the slaves began to dance, graceful, undulating dances to enchanting music. Thereupon the little mermaid, lifting her beautiful white arms and raising herself on tiptoe, glided on the floor with a grace which none of the other dancers had yet attained. With every motion, her grace and beauty became more apparent, and her eyes appealed more deeply to the heart than the songs of the slaves. Everyone was delighted with it, especially the prince, who called her his foundling, and she danced on, notwithstanding that every time her foot touched the ground, it was like treading on sharp knives. The prince said that she should always be near him, and she was allowed to sleep outside his door on a velvet cushion. He had a man's dress made for her so that she could ride about with him. They used to ride through scented woods where the green branches brushed her shoulders and little birds sang among the fresh leaves. She climbed up the highest mountains with the prince, and although her delicate feet bled so that others saw it, she only laughed and followed him until they saw the clouds sailing below them like a flock of birds, taking flights to distant lands. At home in the prince's palace, when at night the others were asleep, she used to go out onto the marble steps. It cooled her burning feet to stand in the cold sea water, and at such times she used to think of those she had left in the deep. One night, her sisters came arm in arm. They sank so sorrowfully as they swam on the water that she beckoned to them, and they recognized her and told her how she had grieved them all. After that, they visited her every night, and one night she saw, a long way out, her old grandmother, who for many years had not been above the water, and the Merman King with his crown on his head. They stretched out their hands toward her, but did not venture so close to land as her sisters. Day by day she became dearer to the prince. He loved her as one loves a good, sweet child, but it never entered his head to make her his queen. Yet, unless she became his wife, she would never win an everlasting soul, but on his wedding morning would turn to sea foam. Am I not dearer to you than any of them? The little mermaid's eyes seemed to say when he took her in his arms and kissed her beautiful brow. Yes, you are the dearest one to me, said the prince, for you have the best heart of them all, and you are fondest of me. You are also like a young girl I once saw, but whom I never expect to see again. I was on board a ship which was wrecked. I was driven on shore by the waves close to a holy temple where several young girls were ministering at a service. The youngest of them found me on the beach and saved my life. I saw her but twice. She was the only person I could love in this world, but you are like her. You almost drive her image out of my heart. She belongs to the holy temple, and therefore, by good fortune, you have been sent to me. We will never part. Alas, he doesn't know that it was I who saved his life, thought the little mermaid. I bore him over the sea to the wood where the temple stands. I sat behind the foam and watched to see if anyone would come. I saw the pretty girl he loves better than me, and the mermaid heaved a bitter sigh, for she couldn't weep. The girl belongs to the holy temple, he has said. She will never return to the world. They will never meet again. I'm here with him. I see him every day. Yes, I will tend him, love him, and give up my life to him. But now the rumor ran that the prince was to be married to the beautiful daughter of a neighboring king, and for that reason was fitting out a splendid ship. It was given out that the prince was going on a voyage to see the adjoining countries, but it was without a doubt to see the king's daughter. He was to have a great suite with him. But the little mermaid shook her head and laughed. She knew the prince's intentions much better than any of the others. I must take this voyage, he had said to her. I must go and see the beautiful princess. My parents demand that. But they will never force me to bring her home as my bride. I can never love her. She will not be like the lovely girl in the temple whom you resemble. If ever I had to choose a bride, it would sooner be you with your speaking eyes, my sweet dumb foundling. And he kissed her rosy mouth, played with her long hair, and laid his head upon her heart, which already dreamed of human joys and an immortal soul. You are not frightened by the sea, I suppose, my dumb child, he said, as they stood on the proud ship which was to carry them to the country of the neighboring king. And he told her about storms and calms, about curious fish in the deep, and the marvels seen by divers. And she smiled at his tales, for she knew all about the bottom of the sea much better than anyone else. At night, in the moonlight, when all were asleep, except the steersman who stood at the helm, She sat at the side of the ship, trying to pierce the clear water with her eyes, and fancied she saw her father's palace, and above it her old grandmother with her silver crown on her head, looking up through the cross currents toward the keel of the ship. Then her sisters rose above the water. They gazed sadly at her, wringing their white hands. She beckoned to them, smiled, and was about to tell them that all was going well and happily with her, when the cabin boy approached and the sisters dived down. But he supposed that the white objects he had seen were nothing but flakes of foam. The next morning, the ship entered the harbor of the neighboring king's magnificent city. The church bells rang and trumpets were sounded from every lofty tower, while the soldiers paraded with flags flying and glittering bayonets. There was a fete every day. There was a succession of ball, and receptions followed one after the other. But the princess was not yet present. She was being brought up a long way off in the holy temples, they said, and was learning all the royal virtues. At last she came. The little mermaid stood eager to see her beauty. She was obliged to confess that a lovelier creature she had never beheld. Her complexion was exquisitely pure and delicate, and her trustful eyes of the deepest blue shone through their dark lashes. "It is you," said the prince, "you who saved me when I lay almost lifeless on the beach." And he clasped his blushing bride to his heart. "Oh, I am too happy," he exclaimed to the little mermaid. "A greater joy than I had dared to hope for has come to pass. You will rejoice at my joy, for you love me better than anyone." Then the little mermaid kissed his hand and felt as if her heart were broken already. His wedding morn would bring death to her and change her to foam. All the church bells pealed and heralds rode through the town, proclaiming the nuptials. Upon every altar throughout the land, fragrant oil was burned in costly silver lamps. Amidst the swinging of censers by priests, the bride and bridegroom joined hands and received the bishop's blessing. The little mermaid, dressed in silk and gold, stood holding the bride's train, but her ears were deaf to the festal train. Her eyes saw nothing of the sacred ceremony. She was thinking of her coming death and of all that she had lost in this world. That same evening, the bride and bridegroom embarked amidst the roar of cannon and the waving of banners. A royal tent of purple and gold, softly cushioned, was raised amidships where the bridal pair were to repose during the cool night. The sails swelled in the wind, and the ship skimmed lightly and almost without motion over the transparent sea. At dusk, lanterns of many colors were lighted, and the sailors danced merrily on deck. The little mermaid couldn't help thinking of the first time she came up from the sea and saw the same splendor and gaiety, and she now threw herself among the dancers, whirling as a swallow skims through the air when pursued. The onlookers cheered her in amazement. Never had she danced so divinely. Her delicate feet pained her as if they were cut with knives, but she did not feel it, for the pain at her heart was much sharper. She knew that it was the last night that she would breathe the same air as he, and would look upon the mighty deep and the blue starry heavens. An endless night without thought and without dreams awaited her, who neither had a soul nor could win one. The joy and revelry on board lasted till long past midnight. She went on laughing and dancing with the thought of death all the time in her heart. The prince caressed his lovely bride, and she played with his raven locks. And with their arms entwined, they retired to the gorgeous tent. All became hushed and still on board the ship. Only the steersman stood at the helm. The little mermaid laid her white arms on the gunwale and looked eastwards for the pink tinted dawn. The first sunbeam she knew would be her death. Then she saw her sisters rise from the water. They were as pale as she was. Their beautiful long hair no longer floated on the breeze, for it had been cut off. We have given it to the witch to obtain her help, so that you may not die before. Oh, she had given us a knife where it is. Look how sharp it is. Before the sun rises, you must plunge it into the prince's heart, and when his warm blood sprinkles your feet, they will join together and grow into a tail, and you will once more be a mermaid. You will be able to come down into the water to us and to live out your 300 years before you are turned into dead salt sea foam. Make haste, you or he must die before sunrise. Our old grandmother is so full of grief that her white hair had fallen off as ours fell under the witch's scissors. Slay the prince and come back to us. Quick, quick! Do you not see the rosy streak in the sky? In a few moments the sun will rise, and then you must die. Saying this, they heaved a wondrous deep sigh and sank among the waves. The little mermaid drew aside the purple curtain from the tent and looked at the beautiful bride asleep with her head on the prince's breast. She bent over and kissed his fair brow, looked at the sky where the dawn was spreading fast, looked at the sharp knife, and again fixed her eyes on the prince, who, in his dream, called his bride by name. Yes, she alone was in his thoughts. For a moment, the knife quivered in her grasp. Then she threw it far out among the waves, now rosy in the morning light, and where it fell, the water bubbled up like drops of blood. Once more she looked at the prince, with her eyes already dimmed by death, then dashed overboard and fell, her body dissolving into foam. Now the sun rose from the sea, and with it kindly beams warmed the deadly cold foam, so that the little mermaid did not feel the chill of death. She saw the bright sun, and above her floated hundreds of beauteous ethereal beings, through which she could see the white ship and the rosy heavens. Their voices were melodious, but no spirit like, that no human ear could hear them any more than an earthly eye could see their forms. Light as bubbles, they floated through the air without the aid of wings. The little mermaid perceived that she had a form like theirs. It gradually took shape out of the foam. "To whom am I coming?" said she, and her voice sounded like that of the other beings, so unearthly in its beauty that no music of ours could reproduce it. "To the daughters of the air," answered the others. "A mermaid has no undying soul and can never gain one without winning the love of a human being. Her eternal life must depend upon an unknown power, nor have the daughters of the air an everlasting soul. But by their own good deeds they may create one for themselves. We fly to the tropics, where mankind is the victim of hot and pestilent winds. There we bring cooling breezes, we diffuse the scent of flowers all around, and bring refreshments and healing in our train. When, for 300 years, we have labored to do all the good in our power, we gain an undying soul, and take a part in the everlasting joys of mankind. You, poor little mermaid, have with your whole heart struggled for the same thing as we have struggled for. You have suffered and endured, raised yourself to the spirit world of the air. And now, by your own good deeds, you may, in the course of 300 years, work out for yourself an undying soul. Then the little mermaid lifted her transparent arms toward God's sun and for the first time shed tears. On board ship, all was again life and bustle. She saw the prince with his lovely bride searching for her. They looked sadly at the bubbling foam as if they knew that she had thrown herself into the waves. Unseen, she kissed the bride on her brow, smiled at the prince, and rose aloft with the other spirits of the air to the rosy clouds which sailed above. In 300 years, we shall thus float into paradise. We might reach it sooner, whispered one. Unseen, we flit into those homes of men where there are children, and for every day that we find a good child who gives pleasure to its parents and deserves their love, God shortens our time of probation. The child doesn't know when we fly through the room. And when we smile with pleasure at it, 1 year of our 300 years is taken away. But if we see a naughty or badly disposed child, we cannot help shedding tears of sorrow, and every tear adds a day to the time of our probation. The end. Wow. Wow, that is a sad story. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this fairy tale. I know it's a fairy tale, but it still is sad. Our next story is The Tinderbox. We shall begin it soon. Join me, won't you?